If you want to learn how to land an academic job, stay with me. Hi, and welcome to the Ancon School at howtobecomeaprofessor.com, the web show to learn from proven professors and experts. I'm your host Stefan, and today we're going to cover a very important topic for all young and aspiring academics who are thinking of or who have a strong and deep desire to become a professor one day. In the course of the next 30 minutes, we're going to cover three areas. The first one is, what are universities looking for in a candidate? Secondly, the specific and often complex recruitment and hiring process of universities. And thirdly, what mistakes potentially able candidates make in that process that damage and often diminish their chances of landing an academic job in the first place. I'm very happy to announce that we have been able to win the probably most suitable person for that particular interview. His name is Jonathan A. Danzig. He's an emeritus professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Illinois and served many years as the chairperson of the department's faculty recruiting committee. Professor Danzig received his undergraduate, graduate, and doctorate degrees from Johns Hopkins University between 1972 and 1977, and Professor Danzig has received various awards and honors, among them the All-in Outstanding Achievement Award, the Arnold Beckman Award, the Union All Young Faculty Award and Fellow, and ASM International, and a past recipient of the TMS Bruce Chalmers Award in 2005. Professor Danzig was selected for outstanding contributions to materials processing education through award-winning classroom teaching and industrial short courses, development of innovative undergraduate and graduate classes, and textbook writing. So in a nutshell, Professor Jonathan Danzig has been and is an excellent teacher and researcher and also administrator at the same time. So Jonathan, thank you so much for taking your time for this interview. I know you are very super busy. And I mentioned in the intro that you served a couple of years as the chairperson of your department's faculty recruiting committee. So you were the ideal candidate for that interview. And you know exactly what universities are looking for in a candidate and how the process exactly looks like. And you even published a guide, and this is how I found you, in a PDF format with the title Landing an Academic Job, the Process and the Pitfalls. Everybody can search it and access it in the internet right away. So the first question I'd like to ask you after that intro is, please share with our audience, why did you write and publish that guide, that insider's guide from your perspective as the chairperson of this recruiting committee in the first place?
Okay, well, thanks. I'm glad to be with you. Thanks for the invitation and the very kind introduction. The reason I wrote that brochure was that as chair of the faculty recruiting committee, I found that there were a lot of people who didn't really seem to understand the process from our perspective. And that interfered with their ability to really succeed at the process. And so sometimes they either didn't do well on the interview or they didn't reach the interview stage because of mistakes that they made along the way. And so as a teacher, I want people to learn and to do better. And so that was why I wrote that brochure, to try to make it easier for people to do that.
Right. Okay, the connection is not so well. Let's hope that it's going to become better. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, what are universities are looking for in a candidate, and is your answer that you're going to provide limited to the US region and also limited to the sciences, or can your recommendation that you're going to provide in a couple of seconds also can be applied to all university systems out there?
Well, I think that since all of my experience is in the sciences, right, some of my comments might be a bit more appropriate for that venue, but many of the things that I'm going to talk about really are very general kinds of things that would really apply to anyone
Right.
when they're interviewing for jobs. Some of them might not even be restricted to academic jobs. So we'll talk about some general things, some specific things, and maybe when I make a few comments, if they feel very particular to science or engineering, people can factor that in or out.
All right, okay. So first of all, what are universities, what are departments looking for in a candidate?
Okay. Oh, I noticed I didn't answer your question about US versus European universities. My experience is in the US universities. I do have some extensive experience in Swiss university. And in general, they're looking for the same kinds of things. And those are, professors are expected to be teachers at undergraduate level and graduate level. They're expected to do research, which they usually have to write proposals to bring in grants. They're supposed to work with graduate students. They're supposed to publish papers, attend meetings, become famous, and by reflection, bring honor and prestige to their respective universities. They're supposed to serve societies, serve the university on various committees associated with the administrative workings of the university. And when they have time, they're also supposed to consult and work with people in industry or whatever their particular field is. So they're looking in a way for super people, because nobody can do all of those things all of the time and do them really well.
Right.
But one of the most difficult aspects of the recruitment process is that, and my comments are mostly aimed at people who are looking for junior faculty positions. Senior faculty positions are somewhat different. So for junior faculty, often they have never done any of those things. If they've done some teaching, they probably haven't done extensive teaching. Sometimes they're not the primary instructor for the course. They might be a teaching assistant. They often have not written research proposals, or if they have only done them, say, at the university level, where a 1 or a 2-page proposal is all that's required, and it doesn't have the sort of outside competition. They've probably done some publishing, but often their faculty mentor is the one who has been the lead author. And I find all too often some students don't get very much exposure at meetings and other places outside of campus. So the thing that makes it difficult on both sides is that the student is interviewing for a position that requires them to do many things that they've never done before. And from the university side, they're trying to judge the student's ability to do those things based on something else other than what they're actually going to be doing.
Okay,
that's one of the things that
makes it difficult. Okay, but can you elaborate on that? And how can applicants become better prepared or become a better fit to the requirements or to the things, to the factors and abilities and skill sets that the faculties are actually looking for?
I think one of the best ways to prepare is to understand what people are looking for, right, and to adjust your thinking in that with respect to that. So, for example, I'll get into this in more detail a little bit later,
right, but
almost always the interview involves a seminar, and people who attend your seminar, the ones who are in your field, will be able to judge something about the quality of research. The ones who are not in your field will be able to make some judgment about your ability to teach by your ability to transmit to them some ideas that they didn't know before, which is essentially what a teacher does.
Right. Jonathan, could you explain what a seminar exactly is in that context?
Okay. Usually, the way the process works is that after some preliminaries, which we can maybe discuss later, the student is invited to campus for an interview. And during that interview, one of the things they will be asked to do is to present usually a 45-minute seminar on their research.
Mm-hmm.
And they will do whatever is typical for that discipline. So in my discipline, and most of them these days, it seems people give some sort of an electronic PowerPoint type presentation where they show their research, they guide people through what are the important ideas, and they help. So they're basically showing their wares to the public as to what they have done and what they're able to do later.
Mm-hmm. And who is attending that seminar?
Usually it's a combination of the faculty in the department and graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
And it will vary from place to place, but in general, you can expect that most of the people who are going to be involved with making the decision about hiring are going to be there. And many of the students in the department, many places they have students are required to attend seminars, so you'll have an audience made up of graduate students in that department. So some of the people will be directly in your field,
right,
and others will be more peripheral. So those are the ones who are really going to be judging your ability to communicate and be a teacher, whereas the others might be judging more on the quality of your research contributions.
Okay, all right. Okay, to wrap up the first question, what universities are looking for, it seems that the situation is as follows. So the universities, the departments are looking for super people, right? People who are able to excel in research, in teaching and administration, and also they should have shown the ability to write research grants and so forth. But the reality is that in most cases, what I could hear from your explanations is that that not many people are fulfilling that profile, that requirement profile, and so this leads us to the second question: how does the specific and complex recruitment and hiring process of universities exactly look like?
Okay, before I get into that, let me just respond to what you just said.
Right.
It's not so much that the people don't have the skills, but they don't necessarily have the experience,
right,
to have demonstrated all of those things. Okay, so the way the process works is, in general, a department will decide that it's going to hire somebody. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means that they got funding for that position from someplace in the university, and they will have spent some time trying to decide who it is they're trying to hire, what areas of specialty they might be looking for. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll be looking for what we used to call the best athlete available, meaning that I was in a mechanical engineering department that had 50-some faculty members. And so we had most of the areas covered. What we were looking for was strength. Mm-hmm. And but there were also times when we were looking for somebody in a specific area. So in general, they'll write an ad somewhere. And that ad might appear in the trade journals for your field. It might appear in general places, like many science and engineering jobs are advertised in Science and Nature magazine. They are often advertised on bulletin boards at conferences, sometimes just by word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So a student who's looking for an academic job needs to cast a fairly broad net. These days, it's somewhat easier because they'll also be posted on a university's website, and so some creative Googling should be able to help you find those jobs as well. There are also some compilations that come out in various fields the student does need to spend some time trying to find those jobs that are available.
Right.
The process consists of basically 4 steps, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
First one is the initial application, where you respond to that ad and you send in whatever is requested. And that may actually be a 2-step process, because it's often the case that there will be hundreds of applicants for a single position.
Mm-hmm.
And so often the first thing that comes in is simply a letter of transmittal and a CV. And then the university will do some sort of follow-up to request other things if they need them, like transcripts, references, statements of research and teaching, etc. And then the process will seem to go dormant for a while, because it takes a considerable amount of time for busy faculty members to do the triage of the hundreds of candidates and try to whittle it down to a more manageable number. And once they've done that, then the top few candidates, it could be as few as 3, as many as I've heard of, 10 or 15, who are invited to campus to give an interview, in which case they'll have to give a seminar, they'll meet a lot of people, and try to decide whether it's a good fit. And I should mention at this point, the interview means that you're actually looking at each other, mm-hmm. and the student needs to decide whether this job is a good fit for his or her interests, as well as the university deciding whether they want that person or not. And then the final stages will come afterwards. There'll be an offer, assuming that the university wants to hire. Mm-hmm. And then there can be some negotiation after that. So I'll try to talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail.
Jonathan, I'd like to ask you, at what career level are we talking about?
Right now, some of these things are fairly general, but most of my comments are focused on the fresh PhD or person who's had a couple of years of postdoc.
Okay, got it.
Who's applying for an entry-level position, so assistant professor.
Right.
At the higher level, things are a little bit different. There, the fit is often well known in advance. Mm-hmm. It's much more specific. So in the initial application, I'll try to combine my response to this question also with the last question that you elaborated in the beginning, right. Which is the mistakes that people can make along the way.
Sure.
So the first thing you do is you respond to having seen this advertisement. And so you send a letter, a cover letter, that specifically identifies the position and how you learned of it. And then in a paragraph or so, not much more, explains what it is about you that makes you fit the description for that job. And then you include, in general, they'll ask for a CV, which you will include with that, and you can bring out the highlights of the CV that are particularly relevant to that question about why you fit. You should make sure that you include only what is asked for. I remember receiving a letter where we asked simply for a CV and a cover letter, and people would send stacks of reprints and all kinds of other stuff. And you can imagine that at times we had 400 applicants. If everybody sent a stack of paper that was this thick, you would need an entire room just to take the initial letters. So it's important to read and respond specifically to the announcement that you saw. In that light, another thing that I should say this, I think also, when there are 400 people and you're trying to whittle it down to 5 or 10, at the beginning, you're actually looking for reasons to reject people rather than reasons to keep them, because you want to make the number smaller that you have to deal with.
Right.
So when If you find somebody sends you what was an obvious form letter that didn't really respond particular to your announcement, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
You look at the CV, and the CV should be clean and professional. I cannot tell you how many CVs I saw that had spelling errors in them. That's completely inexcusable because everybody prepares those documents as something that has a spell checker. So if you send a document that has typos in it, that says you're too lazy to edit your own documents. That doesn't bode well for success in the rest of the process. It's likely to cost you a shot at getting a job.
Right.
What you include on your resume should be professional. So it should include publications. If you have publications that are submitted but not yet accepted, that's okay. Sometimes people want to make the list longer, and they'll list several publications and say they're in preparation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's completely meaningless because you don't know whether it doesn't tell you anything except that perhaps you thought the list was too short.
Right.
So just it is what it is. So present yourself in a clear, clean, and professional way. One other thing that's kind of important to do is, and this is a relatively recent thing, go to your Facebook page and clean it up. Chances are somebody from the department is going to take a look at it, and you don't want to see some things on there that don't look very professional. And many, many people have things on their Facebook pages that don't look very, very professional.
Right.
So you have to realize that if they're going to try to hire you for a job, they expect you to do that job. That means they expect you to be in some ways like them, not like a student, no longer a student.
Mm-hmm.
So how the process continues from that is usually there's a committee of people who look at the applications, and it could be as large as 10, it could be as small as 3 or 4. But in general, what it's going to take those busy people time to go through all of them, and it may take several weeks before you get any real response. You should get some sort of acknowledgement right away that they received your application. And that could come in email, it could come as a postcard, it just varies with the institution. But you want to make sure that they at least got it. And it doesn't help to keep pestering and calling and saying, what about, have you looked at my application now, or whatever. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if something changes, like you have a job offer from one institution and you really would prefer to go to this other one, it's okay to call and say, well, I have an offer. Are you guys going to do something, or do I need to move on?
Right.
So, as I said, the applications are going to be whittled down to 10 to 15, which is a little bit more manageable, and they'll ask for letters of reference for that. Depending on how they worded the ad, perhaps you've already told them about who your referees are. Choosing referees is also a very important thing that students need to be careful about. First of all, you make sure that they have an up-to-date CV, so that when I go to write a letter about you, I can look at your CV and I can include some real details that indicate that I know you.
Right.
I have seen cases where students have asked for references from people they didn't know very well, but because they were famous. Mm-hmm. And it actually doesn't do you very much good to get a letter from a famous person that says, well, I think I may have met this person one time, but I really don't remember. That doesn't help you at all. What you need is things that are very specific. You should probably ask people if they're willing to write a letter of reference for you. Also, you should avoid non-technical references. Sometimes it's difficult for students who haven't had a lot of exposure to find references who are in their field, but it doesn't help to get a letter from somebody who worked in a clothing store with you, something like that. It has to be somebody who can really respond to what and understand the needs of the academic world.
Right.
I have actually heard of cases where people will say, yes, you go ahead and write the reference letter and give it to me and I'll send it. And in general, I think that's such a bad idea that it's a good indication you should go ask somebody else.
Yeah.
So let's suppose now that we go to the next stage where you've been invited to campus. So that means that you're on the short list.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to ask for 3 to 5 people usually. Usually you'll get a phone call or an email and you'll go back and forth trying to figure out what the right dates are, and you'll find a time when you can come to campus. Typically these are 2-day visits. They will expect you to give a seminar, so you should be prepared already with a title and an abstract for your seminar and perhaps a brief bio for yourself that you would like them to read when you start your talk.
Mm-hmm.
You should ask what facilities will be available. These days, it's very rare that you go someplace that doesn't have a projector for a laptop presentation, but it wouldn't be very good to show up someplace with something that's not compatible. I'll talk about that briefly a bit later. And you should also ask for some detailed information about the department. At this point, many places you can get the information you need by visiting their webpage. But you should also ask them for whatever literature they have about their department so that you understand very well who you're going to see and what their expertise is when you get there.
Right.
So in general, you're going to have to travel to go to the interview. So you need to have a credit card on which actually has an available balance of $1,000 to $2,000 so that you can charge your airfare. It's quite acceptable to ask the institution to make local hotel reservations for you. They know where the better places are and what's more convenient. Make sure you save your receipts for everything because you're going to be asked to fill out a travel expense form.
Right.
Make sure that if your interview is on Monday and Tuesday, that you don't plan to arrive the last flight on Sunday, because sometimes that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to make sure that you arrive on time. Don't make if your interview is Monday and Tuesday, don't make your flight arrangement to go out at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. You're going to end up pressed all day. You can spend another night to go out the next day. Air travel is always an issue. Flight delays, security delays are pretty common. Baggage gets lost.
Mm.
If you put some things that you really need, like decent-looking interview clothes, in your bag and they don't arrive, you could end up in a rather embarrassing situation. One particular thing that shows up is that happens more often than we'd like to say, is that if you take the last flight of the day into a small town, a lot of times those flights are canceled. The University of Illinois is in Champaign, and it's actually fairly rare that the last flight of the day actually makes it. Mm-hmm. So usually they end up coming in the night before, or they end up coming in the next day. So make sure that you take that side of the stress away from the interview.
Right.
So in addition to traveling in reasonable looking clothes, and another reason to do that is often someone from the university will meet you at the airport. You want to look professional all the time. You should always carry your talk with you. If you're giving it on a laptop, carry your laptop. You should also always have a backup, like a USB stick.
Mm.
Sometimes I will send a presentation by email before I go,
right,
and ask them to make sure that it works on their system. One particular problem, it's a little bit more specific to the technical areas. I use a Mac, and often Microsoft, for whatever reason, does not provide the same fonts on Mac and PCs. And so I have seen many times that it happens to people that they try to move their presentation from their Mac to the PC and the fonts don't show up.
Right.
And it's a particular problem for equations. And there is a way around this. And the way around it is that instead of typesetting the equation using PowerPoint, you typeset the equation someplace else. There are some nice things, nice tools, for example, for using LaTeX. And then you can drop and drag a bitmap into the PowerPoint presentation, and that can't go wrong because it doesn't require the font.
Right.
You should ask for an itinerary before you go. They will probably schedule meetings for you all day. You'll be going from one faculty member to another. And sometimes some institutions don't necessarily do this in the right way. I have seen cases where even if it's a 2-day interview, then they schedule the seminar as the last thing on the second day. If your seminar is scheduled for the last thing of the second day, is that in all of your individual meetings, you won't have very much to talk about, and so you'll end up giving that seminar 14 times. And by the time you give it, you'll be bored with it.
Right.
And so you should ask them sometimes, just say, let's do this on the first day if it's at all possible. In general, that's a much better thing to do.
May I ask you why is the institution scheduling meetings throughout the 2 days? What kind of meetings, and what's the point of these meetings?
Usually they are meetings with individual faculty members or perhaps small groups, and they'll be 30 to 45 minutes. And this is a chance for people to ask you a little bit more in-depth questions, to get to meet you. But one of the things that they're looking for is colleagues.
Right.
Do I want to work with this person?
Got it.
And to make that go much better, you asked for the itinerary. You have the opportunity to read up on the people who are on your list. You can look at what their area is, maybe read some of their papers. Nobody is any happier than when they begin to talk to you and you say, oh yes, I read your recent paper on such and such. So obviously you're a connoisseur of good papers when they do that. So it's important to have done your homework.
Right.
Some sort of practical things is that you should look like you belong there. So that means that the way you dress should look like a colleague. For men, I recommend that they wear ties and a jacket, or perhaps a suit. Women should wear a business dress or a business suit. Any jewelry that you wear should be discreet. Since you're going to be walking around a lot, it's good to have comfortable clothes and especially comfortable shoes.
Right.
One thing I often point out when I talk about this to people is that what many people have is they have a suit or a dress that they wore to a wedding, because grad students don't have a lot of reason to go to have a lot of nice clothes. Usually, if you wore it to a wedding, it's too fancy for this. Go out and buy something that's appropriate. And as I said earlier, you should make sure that you look professional when you're traveling. It's possible that your baggage will get lost.
Right.
So during these office visits that we talked about a little bit, first thing you're going to do in general, you'll walk into someone's office. Usually someone will take you to that place. You'll meet the person. You should learn how to shake hands properly. That means you look the person in the eye, you have a firm grip. This seems obvious, but many times students are nervous. They look down instead of at the person, and they don't provide a firm handshake. It provides a very cold first impression.
Right.
And then they have to get over that. You should be prepared to discuss science or research. If you're not in the science area, you should be prepared to discuss whatever is in your area.
Sure.
Usually they assign a host to you, one faculty member who kind of makes sure that everything is going all right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually important to realize that your host is not your friend. You don't want to confide in them. You don't want to ask them how you're doing. You simply want to keep that at an arm's length professional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So when you will often have meals together. Maybe if you're going to be there for 2 days, you could even have breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch. It happens.
Right.
And so one of the things I highly recommend is avoiding drinking alcohol in these situations, particularly in the evening. It's very common for people to do that, but if it's more likely that you're going to say something stupid when you're drinking than when you're not.
Right.
And so if everyone else is having a glass of wine and you would like to have some wine, take the glass, but don't finish it. Don't drink much. Then you don't have to make an issue of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I try to recommend avoiding alcohol. You should be prepared to ask questions as well as answer them. You should ask people about their research, about teaching, about various things with respect to the institution. And also, invariably, you're going to end up in somebody's office where you have absolutely nothing to talk about. And for those cases, ask about the location, ask about the activities, ask about the schools, ask about what it's like to live in this community.
Right.
This will help go to the question of, is this a place where I want to be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You will be asked at almost every stop what your future plans are for teaching and research.
Right.
And you should tell that like you're still excited about it and still interested in it, even if it's the 10th time today you've said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a little difficult to do, but you have to realize that the person on the other end is hearing it only for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to make it doesn't make a good impression if you sound like you're bored
right.
with your work. They will ask you what your research objectives are, what courses you plan to teach. It would make sense then to have gone through the catalog and see which courses that the department offers you would be qualified to teach. There are some inappropriate questions that sometimes get asked, and this is now more specific to the United States. It's illegal in the United States to ask a question about whether you're married or not. Mm-hmm. And other sexual orientations, religions, or there's a large number of those. But it's actually a fairly natural thing for somebody to ask if you're married.
Mm.
And so you need to think about beforehand how you're going to respond to that question.
Right.
You could say, that's an illegal question. How dare you ask me that? That's probably not the best way to handle that because the person didn't really intend that. If you really don't want to respond to it, you can simply say, if your question is about whether I have a partner who requires a job, then the answer is no, or yes. Or maybe you just want to handle the question by saying, yes, I'm married. In any case, you should decide beforehand how you go so that you're ready for that kind of question, particularly if there's something you're very sensitive about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You should decide how you're going to handle that if it does come up.
Okay.
Since we were talking about spouses, I think I maybe have something about this later, but if you have a spouse who needs to find a position, then you might as well talk about it now. If you're not going to take the job, if your spouse doesn't get a job in the area, then it's an issue that needs to be discussed. Many places have spousal hiring programs, and you can discuss that usually with the department head.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
To that point. Let me say some more words about the seminar. The seminar is in my opinion, is absolutely most important thing that you will do in the time that you're there. So it tells, as I said before, it tells people who are not in your field whether you're a good communicator and whether you're a good teacher.
Right.
It tells people who are in your field how well you understand what you've done and the depth of your work. And so this seminar, I spell out in the brochure, and maybe I won't go through it all the way now, about what the various components are, but it should answer the following questions. What problem did I work on? What specifically did I do? And what is significant about that?
Mm-hmm.
And then, in general, can you communicate that? I have a separate talk that I give on how to give a seminar,
Mm-hmm.
generally how to put presentations together. So I just have a few comments. But probably the most important thing that is required to give a good talk that many, many people do not do is to ask themselves at the beginning, who is my audience?
Right.
Who is listening to this talk? Okay. So for the kinds of audiences that you're going to draw here, which is faculty members in the same department and graduate students in the same department for the most part, you can expect that you will still have to give some background. I typically say 15 minutes or so, which targets everybody in the room. Everybody in the room should understand that, even if they're not very technical or not very well versed in your field. And then you should spend 10 minutes telling them, more specific people who are in your general area, what you know, telling more specifically about how you approach the particular problem. And then you should spend about 10 minutes on your problem, what's very specific in your thesis or the research that you're talking about. And that your targets there should be the people who know the field. And so they'll be able to see that you're an expert about something and that you have some depth. And then finally, 10 minutes on the summary, which again targets everybody who's present in the room and relates your work to the big picture. I highly recommend to everyone that you don't put in too many slides. In general, we all put in too many slides. And then you put your most important stuff at the end. So what happens? You give the talk, you're about 40 minutes into a 45-minute talk, you realize that you have 10 slides left that will have all of your results on them, and you start going click, 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 click. Nobody gets anything out of it.
Right.
And you've lost your audience, you've lost the opportunity to communicate. So you have to choose the level of detail carefully. In the technical areas, the fewer equations you have in a talk like this, the better off you are. You should only have the most important ones if you're going to show them, and even then you should only explain what the physical meaning of the terms is. Nobody really cares about whether you can do a derivation. They'll trust that you did it. They only care about whether you understand the fundamentals and what the results are. There are lots of ways to go wrong in a seminar. In particular, there's lots of things. PowerPoint lets you do lots of things that you should not do.
Right.
And encourages you to do them sometimes. Your visual aids, whatever you use, shouldn't be the focus of your talk. You shouldn't walk away with the idea that, oh, this person is really a great PowerPoint maven. You should try to use a very simple layout. Make your slides consistent in terms of colors and where the titles are from one page to the next.
Right.
One thing I see very often in people who are non-native English speakers is that they're self-conscious about their English, and so they will write very carefully constructed sentences on their PowerPoint slides, 3 or 4 lines long.
Right.
If that happens, then what you always do is you turn around and you read the sentence to an audience who is reading the sentence at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're not communicating this way. You should try to shorten the sentence to. I try to get everything down to 1 line.
Right.
And often you can do that You don't need grammatically correct sentences.
Of course not. Yeah.
Communicate the ideas. And if you do what a lot of people like to do, which is to introduce one bullet item at a time, with each one requiring a click, you will, if you have, say, 5 bullet items per slide and 25 slides, you will click the computer 125 times during your talk. It's kind of hard to make eye contact with your audience when you're doing that. You're only engaging the computer.
Yeah.
So it's really important to try to engage the people in the room. You should always ask for 15 to 20 minutes before your talk to prepare, where they don't have something else scheduled for you. I always try to visit a room. In my career, I've given thousands of talks, but I always try to get to the room before I give the talk so that I know how it's going to feel to stand up in front, how to use the audiovisual equipment that they've given me. Try to know where the halfway point in your talk is, so that if you realize that you're going too fast or too slow, you can make an adjustment. You should practice your talk several times so that you can give it smoothly, but not so many that you're bored with it. Graphs and charts are a long sort of discussion that I'll leave out for now, but it's important to give good graphs. Make sure that they convey information clearly. One thing I see very often is people grab a slice out of an Excel spreadsheet and they'll put something that we sometimes call an eye chart up on their PowerPoint slide that's got 30 different lines with different numbers on them. And then they always say, I know this is a busy slide, but I just want you to see something. Well, okay, you had enough time to present that in a way that I could actually see it, rather than just pull it out of a complicated Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I got your point. So basically, when it comes to the seminar and the PowerPoint presentation, is to make it as user-friendly as possible, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And user-friendly for both of you, so that you can present it smoothly and they can see it smoothly. Videos, one more comment about that. I can see we're pressed for time. Videos are a particular issue. They're difficult often to move from one machine to another.
Right.
And so you have to be really careful about that to make sure that that's going to work.
Alrighty. Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much. So to wrap this up, we covered, and you covered 3 areas which are very critical for the entire process of landing an academic job. If you're aiming for instance, assistant professorship, the first thing is that you discussed was what universities are looking for in a candidate. Secondly, the specific and often complex recruitment and hiring process of universities. And along with that, you pointed out the most frequent mistakes that able candidates make in that process. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So in order to engage our audience, I'd like to ask you, our audience of the Ancon School, what do you think? Do you agree with Professor Danzig in terms of his recommendations and the things that you should do and that you shouldn't do? What are your experiences? Please share your comments, your experiences in the comment section right below the video, and also make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit us at howtobecomeaprofessor.com, the Ancon School, in order to learn more from proven professors and experts.